So you are joining me for the internal compliance guide overview for the workbook. So here we are doing a deep dive into the internal compliance system. So each agency, as a DODD agency, you have to follow a set of rules and regulations by the state that you are certified in. And in this case, we're talking about Ohio. You have to follow a specific set of rules and regulations, and the state will make sure that you're doing so. So, in order to be successful in accomplishing this, you have to develop an internal compliance system for your organization. So, this is not a manual. A manual says that you're going to do a specific set of things. But the system, is the living, breathing document, the way you carry out everything that is required of you through those rules and regulations from your state. So that's what we're developing here. When you were getting certified, of course, you did the director of operations training, and it taught you about the different things that you had to ensure for your agency. So this is how we're going to carry out those things so that you are always ready for an audit. So I created this workbook to close the gap by creating a bridge between understanding the rules and regulations for DOD compliance and being able to successfully carry them out in your agency to make sure you can successfully and efficiently carry out that system. So we're going to be talking about what the rule is, who is going to be responsible for carrying out the system that you create pertaining to that rule, and how. That's what we're going to look at through each section of the training. If you are in Pro Comply Academy, which is an academy that Carmela Menifee, a business growth strategist for non-medical agencies, have created this academy. One of the programs that we have in this academy is Growth Guard Pro. And that program is specifically and intentionally designed to support your full compliance program at your agency. So if you're a part of that program, when I'm going through this workbook, it's going to give you a better understanding of what each section means and what each section requires. However, you won't have to create the entire system because it's already created for you. I've already created all your templates. You will just be plugging in the agency specific, the things that's specific to your agency into that template. So you're not going to recreate the wheel. I've done it all for you. You're just going to go in and put the specific agency specific things into the template and make it your own. So, for example, one of the sections we're going to discuss is background checks. And for background checks, yes, we're going to say the rule, and I've already created the system. If you have access to these templates, I've already created the system of how you're going to carry out the rule. However, you'll need to put what exact place your agency is sending your individuals to make sure background checks are done. So if they're going to B&B, you're going to put that specifically into your template that I've created. If they're going to integrity verifications, you're going to put that in, and then you're going to say what that process looked like, the process that integrity verification has. So if they take a certain paper showing that they're being sent from your agency or whatnot, you're going to include that. So that's what I mean by agency specific things. Those type of details you'll have to add, but the overall is already completed for you in these templates. So I encourage everyone, if you don't have access to these templates, you're not in our program, I encourage you to either do so, consider joining the program, and I'll be happy to give you more information on doing so if you follow the link. However, if that's not something you're interested in doing at this time, I encourage you to pause this training at each section and create your plan right then. And I say that because as I go over the things, it's more likely that you're going to create a program at that time and understand what's being required in that system and carry it out rather than listening all the way through and going and have to go back. So let's get started. Oh, also you can use your workbook. I've created a workbook that you use to follow along with me, and you can plug your system into this workbook. It's the same exact workbook that I'm using to explain right now. So, compliance program oversight. So, here we're talking about who is your compliance officer at your agency, who is going to be responsible to carry out the overall oversight of this manual. So, you should have a compliance officer. And if you just started your agency, that may be you. However, you need to identify who that person is. You can't say, I don't have one. You have to have, if you have an agency, you've already agreed that you're going to have someone who carries out this compliance plan. So you need to be the compliance officer if you are not in a place where you can hire one at this time. So here you're going to identify who the compliance officer is, what their responsibilities are, not just saying they're responsible to carry out the internal compliance plan. No, you need to specifically state what they are required to do. Because even if it's you right now, at some point you're going to hire. And so this is going to help that person understand what's being required of them. They need to be able to train the individuals. They need to be able to go on the state's website and understand the different rules and regulations and articulate that to your staff. They also need to be able to understand it for themselves. They need to be able to understand what's required and how to carry it out to make sure it's done for your agency. So you're figuring out who this person is. You're figuring out what are their responsibilities going to be and how they're going to carry out those responsibilities. How would they be reached? How would your staff be able to reach this person? Your staff needs to know who the compliance officer is during orientation. And that's what we're talking about in number 2. When are they going to be trained on this? How will they know who the compliance officer is? How do they know what to report? And how do they report it? All that should be a part of your orientation training. So you need to develop this now. You need to develop this system. So add it to your orientation, add this slide to your orientation for compliance, showing who your compliance officer is, how they reach this person, when should they reach out to this person, and what's expected from them if there's an issue or concern within your agency regarding compliance that they become aware of. So, like I said, you're breaking all that information down. Who that person is, what's their phone number, what's their email, so that your staff know what's being required from them and who to send that information to, how to get in contact with that person. And then your compliance officer needs to know their responsibilities once they receive knowledge of an issue or concern, what they need to do next. So here I broke down an example of compliance officers' responsibilities for you. You can literally copy and paste this and create your job description for the compliance officer. And you can use this as a reference of how to lay out the expectations for your staff as well as for your compliance officer. So here you want to pause. You want to pause and create this whole system for your compliance officer now. Develop the training materials. Everything we said that you were going to do as a part of this section, you need to carry those things out now. What is that going to look like? What orientation is going to look like? How are you going to train them on what's expected from them as far as compliance? All that needs to be broken down here. Each section of this, you need to make sure it's working. It's not going to be enough to say, well, I hired Linda to carry out the compliance and I told her everything she needed to do. And then it's an audit and you see she hasn't done any of that. That's still going to fall on you. You need to make sure that everything you stated is being carried out and it's effective. It's happening on a regular basis. Your staff understands what's expected of them and it's working. If it's not working, you need a training plan on either revising it and then educating your staff of the new way you're going to carry out these things, or a retraining for your employee who seems to be not understanding what's expected of them. You need to show that you did a retraining. If you don't document, it didn't happen. So you need a sheet that you're going to use every time you retrain one of your individuals, a sheet you're going to use to show that it was done. And that your compliance team is meeting. When do they meet to go over the effectiveness of this program? When are you meeting to make sure that the retraining took place and that you have the documents, the completed documents showing that it happened? When is this thing happening? So now we're talking about background checks. Each individual is going to be responsible to complete a background check for your agency. But even deeper than that, there's other things. It's not just going to the B&B or whatnot and getting a background check done. You're also required to check the registry. You're required to check the registry to make sure that this person hasn't done anything on their criminal record that falls in certain categories. And you need to know what those categories are. So you want to make sure you're using ARCS or a system that's comparable to ARCS that does this check for you. And then you also want to make sure that you're enrolling your individuals into RAPBAC. You're following this rule. So the rule is laid out, and then you're saying that your employees, your contractors, and subcontractors are all falling under this category. So anybody who works for your agencies, your volunteers, everybody who works for your agency has to have this process completed. So you don't get to say, well, that they're not my employee because I contract them, so I don't have a background check on them. You have to have a file with their background check done, their ARCS was done, showing that they was compared to all these systems to make sure that they didn't have any infractions that fell under the things that make them inhirable, and also that you also enroll them into RAPBAC. And RAPBAC is what's going to show you if today they don't have an offense, but 6 months, 2 years, 5 years after they get hired, they have an offense. Wrapback is going to show you, enrolling them in Wrapback will send you out information if they get an offense, because they're going to be connected to your agency because you've enrolled them in this system. So you want to make sure that before the person starts working for you, that these things were done. You're going to use a background check receipt. So before they start working for you, you'll have their receipt. No, you don't have to have the background check yet for 60 days. However, you have to have the receipt that before they started working for your agency, they went and had a background check done. If you don't have the receipt, it did not happen. So you need to make sure that you have all these things in place before you hire your first employee, when you're going to do ARCs, when you're going to do Wrapback, how that system is going to look. What if you don't get the receipt? You're not going to hire them, is what you're going to say. If you don't get the receipt, you don't hire. If you don't get the background check within 60 days, you're taking them off the schedule. Or you're not hiring them, up to you, but they cannot work after 60 days of no background check coming to you. It's not enough to say, well, I have the receipt, but it's day 70 and I still haven't had the background check received yet, so they're still working. No, the rule tells you how to operate. You do not make up your own rules. So it's also telling you specific things that's going on, maybe your application, but this is all a part of your hiring process. So this will fall under your HR. This will fall under when you're bringing on employees, what's going to be expected to be in their files. So you're going to be able to show that you enrolled them into the ARC system. ARC system is not, you don't have to use ARCs. You can use a different system. However, you have to make sure it hit each section that's identified in the rule. Wrapback, you have to enroll them into a Wrapback. You cannot use a different system. So you're going to have how your HR individual is going to make sure this is done, what that looks like when it's happening. This is saying that all employees will sign an attestation agreement upon application. And this means that they're saying that they will notify your agency within 14 calendar days if they are charged or convicted or plead guilty to something that makes them ineligible for your agency. They have to sign it. And so this should be, if you have one of our policy and procedures or information from us, you would have an application that has this attestation as a part of it. And you're showing them the list. You're showing them the list. So you're not just having them sign this, you're showing them the list, and you're going to have a form that they sign on the list with the list on it, showing that they reviewed the disqualifying factors and they're signing saying that none of those apply to them. Do people lie? Yes, people lie. But this is taking that responsibility off your agency until you receive their background check. This is saying you have their word saying that they don't fall in any of these disqualifying sections, and that you did your due diligence until the background check comes. Once the background check comes, you have to then compare it to the disqualifying offenses and make a decision. Do this pass? And you need to write it on there because you need to show that you looked at it, that it was looked at and it was compared to the list. So you're going to sign off on it, receive such and such date, and you could say something like approved or hired such and such date, to show that you looked at it and it was good to move forward with their employment. So here I created a whole system that I'm sharing with you of everything that needs to happen in order for you to carry out this rule. So you're going to make sure that you have a spreadsheet. This has been the easiest way for me. You have a spreadsheet with all these different factors of onboarding, and you can easily follow what's been done, what hasn't been done, when things expire, and so on and so forth, so that you can see if the background check came after you got the receipt and so on and so forth, so that you can make sure you are compliant. So I want to note, if an employee is arrested or convicted of a crime, the agency will receive the notification through RAPBAC and remove the employee immediately within 24 hours. So this states that you're going to, if you realize 10 minutes into their shift that they have been convicted of a crime, you're going to try to work on it immediately and not to proceed 24 hours. So that's what this is saying. This is showing how you're going to live out the rule that's associated with background checks. So now I want you to focus on developing your plan of how you're going to carry this out. Create your spreadsheet now with all the different factors that's listed on the training that we just did, the page before, and create it for your agency. Also, a good thing to create while you're creating the spreadsheet, use that same spreadsheet, that same list, and create a file checker that goes on the front of your file folders for employees, so that you can also have it on their file. What's in their file, what's missing. It allows you to be able to see all those things beforehand. So you want it on spreadsheet so that you can be able to access it from anywhere. And you also want it on top of the file so you can be able to see when you audit your files that such and such is missing or such and such is due. This is going to give you different ways to complete checks and balances as you do so. Design the program, design the spreadsheets, design that file checker we just spoke about, and how you're going to train the HR personnel to make sure all these things are done. All that should be created here. How are you going to make sure this system is effective? You need to be meeting with the HR personnel to make sure this is working for your agency. Do you need to change anything? Do you need to add anything? Do it make sense to wait until day 60? Do it give you enough time, or should you wait to whatever day falls on the last Friday? So maybe the 55th day, or the last Friday, because the 60th day may fall on the weekend. Different things that make sense for your agency, you're going to draw that out here.